Welcome to Brainish English Stories.
Dr. Gray, a brilliant but daring scientist, had spent years perfecting a potion that could make a person invisible. When he finally succeeded, he thought he had unlocked unimaginable power. But as he shared his story with his old friend, Kemp, the truth came out. The very thing that made him invisible also brought endless problems. Constant isolation, the inability to eat in public, and the fear of being discovered. The excitement of invisibility quickly turned into frustration and loneliness. As Kemp listened, he realized that Dr. Gray's greatest invention had become his worst mistake. "But now you begin to understand," said the invisible man. "The full problem of my situation. I had no place to stay, no clothes. To wear clothes would take away my advantage and make me look strange and scary. I was hungry because if I ate, the food inside me would make me visible again in a very strange way." "I didn't think of that," said Kemp. "Neither did I. And the snow showed me more dangers. I couldn't walk in the snow. It would fall on me and show my shape. Rain, too, would make me a wet outline like the shape of a man made of water, a bubble. And in fog, I would be a faint bubble in the fog, like a shiny, unclear human shape. Also, as I walked outside, in the air of London, I got dirt on my feet and dust on my skin. I didn't know how long it would take before I became visible because of the dirt. But I knew it wouldn't take long. Not in London, at least. I went to the poorer parts of town, near Great Portland Street, and I reached the end of the street where I had been staying. I didn't go down that street because there was a crowd. My biggest problem was to get clothes. I wasn't sure what to do about my face. Then I saw in one of those small shops that sell many things like newspapers, sweets, toys, cards, and leftover Christmas stuff, there were masks and fake noses. I understood that my face problem was solved. Suddenly, I knew what to do. I turned around, no longer lost, and started walking. I went through the less busy streets to avoid people, towards the small streets north of the Strand. The day was cold, and the wind was sharp in the streets. I walked quickly to avoid getting caught. Every crossing was dangerous, and I had to watch every person carefully. As I was about to pass a man at the top of Bedford Street, he suddenly turned and bumped into me. I almost fell under the wheel of a passing cab. The people near the cab thought he had some kind of attack. This scared me so much that I went into Covent Garden Market and sat quietly in a corner near some flowers, shaking and breathing hard. I realized I had caught another cold and had to leave before my sneezing got too much attention. Finally, I found the shop I was looking for. It was a dirty, dusty little shop in a small street near Drury Lane. The window was full of shiny clothes, fake jewels, wigs, shoes, and photos of actors. The shop was old and dark, and the building above it had 4 floors, all looking dark and sad. I looked through the window and, seeing no one inside, I went in. The door made a bell ring. I left the door open and walked around a stand with clothes. I hid behind a tall mirror. No one came for a minute or two. Then I heard heavy footsteps, and a man came into the shop. My plan was now clear. I would go into the house, hide upstairs, and wait for the right moment. When everything was quiet, I would find a wig, a mask, glasses, and clothes. Then I would go back into the world, looking strange but still possible. And while I was at it, I could steal some money from the house. The man who came into the shop was short, thin, with a hunched back, thick eyebrows, long arms, and very short legs. It looked like I had interrupted his meal. He looked around the shop like he expected to see someone. He looked surprised, then angry when he saw the shop was empty. I started to follow him, but he stopped quickly when he heard me move. I stopped too, surprised at how fast he heard me. He shut the door to the house in my face. I stood there, not sure what to do. Suddenly, I heard him coming back, and the door opened again. He stood there, looking around the shop like he still wasn't sure. Then, talking to himself, he checked behind the counter and looked behind some things. Then he looked unsure. He had left the house door open, so I quickly slipped into the other room. It was a strange little room with only a few pieces of furniture, and there were big masks in the corner. There were 3 doors in the little room, one going upstairs and one downstairs, but all of them were closed. I couldn't leave the room while he was there. I could barely move because he was so alert, and I felt a cold breeze down my back. Twice, I almost sneezed but stopped just in time. My feelings were very strange and new, but even so, I was very tired and angry long before he finished eating. But finally, he finished and put his cheap plates on a black tray with his teapot. He also gathered all the crumbs from the mustard-stained cloth and took everything with him. Because his hands were full, he couldn't close the door behind him, as he usually would. I had never seen a man so good at closing doors. I followed him into a very dirty kitchen downstairs. I watched him start washing the dishes, but there was no point in staying down there, and the cold brick floor hurt my feet. So I went back upstairs and sat in his chair by the fire. The fire was burning low, and without thinking, I added some coal. The sound of the coal brought him upstairs at once, and he stood there, staring around the room. He almost touched me. Even after looking carefully, he still wasn't sure. He stopped in the doorway and checked the room one last time before going downstairs. I waited in the little sitting room for a long time, and finally, he came back and opened the door to go upstairs. I just managed to sneak past him. On the stairs, he suddenly stopped, and I almost bumped into him. He stood there, looking back right at my face and listening carefully. "I could have sworn," he said. He pulled on his lower lip with his long hairy hand. His eyes moved up and down the stairs. Then he made a sound and continued going upstairs. He was about to open a door, but then he stopped again, looking angry and confused. He was starting to notice the small sounds of me moving around him. The man had very sharp hearing. Suddenly, he became very angry. "If there's anyone in this house," he shouted. But he didn't finish the threat. He put his hand in his pocket, didn't find what he was looking for, and rushed past me, loudly and angrily, downstairs. But I didn't follow him. I sat at the top of the stairs until he came back. Soon, he came back upstairs, still muttering to himself. He opened the door to a room, and before I could go in, he slammed it in my face. I decided to explore the house and spent some time doing it as quietly as possible. The house was very old, falling apart, and damp. Some of the door handles were stiff, and I was afraid to turn them. In one room next to his, I found a lot of old clothes. I started going through them, and in my excitement, I forgot again how sharp his hearing was. I heard quiet footsteps, and when I looked up, I saw him staring at the messy pile of clothes. He was holding an old-fashioned gun in his hand. I stood perfectly still while he looked around, suspicious and with his mouth open. "It must have been her," he said slowly. "Damn her." He shut the door quietly, and right away I heard him lock it. Then his footsteps moved away. I quickly understood that I was locked in. For a minute, I didn't know what to do. I walked from the door to the window and back, feeling confused. I suddenly felt very angry, but I decided to look at the clothes before I did anything else. My first try made a pile of clothes fall down from a high shelf. This brought him back, looking more dangerous than before. This time, he actually touched me, then jumped back, shocked, and stood in the middle of the room, surprised. After a moment, he calmed down a little. "Rats," he whispered, putting his fingers on his lips. He was clearly a bit scared. I quietly moved out of the room, but one of the wooden floorboards made a noise. Then, the annoying little man started going all over the house, holding his gun, locking door after door, and putting the keys in his pockets. When I realized what he was doing, I got so mad. I almost couldn't stop myself from acting right away. By this time, I knew he was alone in the house, so I didn't wait anymore. I hit him on the head. "Hit him on the head?" Kemp said, surprised. "Yes, I knocked him out. While he was going downstairs, I hit him from behind with a stool that was on the landing. He fell down the stairs like a sack of old shoes." But wait, the normal rules of kindness are fine for normal people. But, Kemp, I needed to leave that house in disguise without him seeing me. I couldn't think of any other way to do it. Then, I tied him up with a fancy vest and wrapped him in a sheet. Wrapped him in a sheet? Yes, I made a sort of bag out of it. It was a good way to keep the fool scared and quiet. It was also really hard for him to get out of. His head was far from the string. "My dear Kemp, stop looking at me like I'm a murderer. I had to do it. He had a gun. If he saw me, he could describe me." "But still," said Kemp, "here in England today. And he was in his own house, and you were, well, stealing." "Stealing? Come on, Kemp, are you really gonna call me a thief now? Don't be silly. Can't you see my situation?" "And his situation too," said Kemp. The invisible man stood up quickly. "What are you trying to say?" Kemp's face got a little serious. He was about to speak but stopped himself. "I suppose, after all," he said, changing his tone, "you didn't have a choice. You were stuck. But still, of course I was stuck, really stuck, and he made me so angry, chasing me around the house, playing with his gun, locking and unlocking doors. He was just so annoying. You don't blame me, do you? You don't blame me?" "I never blame anyone," said Kemp. "Blaming people is out of style. What did you do next?" "I was hungry. Downstairs I found some bread and cheese. Not the best, but enough to fill me up. I had some brandy and water, then went back upstairs past my bag. He was lying still, and went to the room with the old clothes. I peeked through the gaps in the curtains. Outside, the day was bright. Compared to the dark and gloomy house, it was blindingly bright. There was a lot of traffic going by. I turned back, with spots of light dancing in front of my eyes, to the dark room behind me. My excitement started to fade, and I began to clearly understand my situation again. I started searching the place carefully. It seemed like the hunchback had been living alone in the house for a while. He was a strange person. I collected anything that could help me from the storeroom full of clothes, and then I carefully chose what I needed. I found a handbag I thought would be useful, and some makeup powder, rouge, and sticky bandages. I thought about painting and putting powder on my face to make myself visible. But the problem was I would need turpentine and other things. It would also take a long time to become invisible again. Finally, I chose a mask that wasn't too strange, dark glasses, gray whiskers, and a wig. I couldn't find underwear, but I could buy that later. For now, I wrapped myself in some fabric and white scarves. I couldn't find socks, but the hunchback's boots were loose, so they worked. In the shop's desk, I found 3 gold coins and about 30 silver coins. In a cupboard, I found 8 pounds in gold. Now I was ready to leave. Then I started to worry. Did I really look believable? I checked myself in a small mirror, looking from all sides to make sure everything was okay. I looked strange, like an actor playing a miser on stage, but it wasn't impossible to believe. Feeling more confident, I took the mirror to the shop, pulled down the blinds, and checked myself again in a big mirror. I spent a few minutes gathering my courage. Then I unlocked the shop door and walked out into the street, leaving the little man tied up. In 5 minutes, I had turned down several streets, and no one seemed to notice me. My last problem was solved. He stopped talking. "And you didn't think about the hunchback anymore?" asked Kemp. "No," said the invisible man. "I don't know what happened to him. I guess he untied himself or got out somehow. The knots were pretty tight." He went silent and looked out the window. "What happened when you went to the Strand?" Kemp asked. "Oh, more disappointment. I thought my problems were over. I thought I could do whatever I wanted as long as I didn't reveal my secret. I thought, whatever I do, no one can stop me. I can just take off my clothes and disappear. I believed I could take money wherever I found it. I planned to have a big meal and stay at a fancy hotel, then buy new things. I was feeling so confident. But looking back, I see how foolish I was. I went into a restaurant and ordered lunch, but then I realized I couldn't eat without showing my invisible face. I finished ordering, told the waiter I'd be back in 10 minutes, and left, feeling annoyed. I don't know if you've ever felt that kind of disappointment when you're hungry. "Not that badly," said Kemp, "but I can imagine it. I could have smashed everything." Finally, starving for good food, I went to another restaurant and asked for a private room. I told them, "I'm badly disfigured." They looked at me strangely but didn't say anything. So at last I got my lunch. It wasn't served well, but it was enough. After eating, I smoked a cigar and tried to plan my next move. Outside, a snowstorm had started. The more I thought about it, Kemp, the more I realized how useless being invisible was in a cold, dirty, crowded city. Before I did this crazy experiment, I dreamed of many benefits. But that afternoon, I was full of disappointment. I thought about the things people desire. Sure, invisibility could help me get them, but it made enjoying them impossible. Ambition. What's the point of being important if no one can see you? Love. What good is love if you can't be with someone properly? I don't care for politics, fame, charity, or sports. What was I supposed to do? I had become a mystery, wrapped up in clothes, a ridiculous version of a man. He paused, glancing at the window. But how did you end up in Iping? Kemp asked, trying to keep him talking. I went there to work. I had one hope. It was just a small idea then. Now it's a complete plan. It's a way to undo what I've done. When I'm ready, when I've done everything I want to do while being invisible. That's what I really want to talk to you about now. Did you go straight to Iping? Asked Kemp. Yes, I just needed my 3 notebooks, my checkbook, my clothes, and some chemicals to work on my idea. I'll show you my calculations when I get my books, and then I started. I remember the snowstorm. It was awful, trying to keep the snow off my fake nose. And at the end, said Kemp, the day before yesterday when people found out about you, you really, according to the papers. Yes, I did. I lost control. Did I kill that stupid policeman? No, said Kemp. He's expected to get better. He's lucky then. I really lost my temper. The fools. Why didn't they leave me alone? And that grocer guy. No one is expected to die, said Kemp. I'm not so sure about my tramp, said the invisible man with a mean laugh. By heaven, Kemp, you don't know what real rage is. To work for years, to plan and plot, and then have some clumsy fool mess everything up. Every kind of idiot has crossed my path. If this keeps happening, I'll go crazy. I'll start hurting them. They've made things so much harder. No doubt that's frustrating, said Kemp calmly.